But we've got some legends up here, so they're all on different stages of their building careers, so to speak. So one thing that I think everybody has at the top of mind right now is obviously the new presidency coming in with Trump, kind of the regulations. So for you guys at the end, John, you've gone through a lot of different payment aspects. Taxation, I'm sure, is one of the top questions that you get. Now, with this new presidency coming in and everything else, are you getting a lot more questions with that, kind of the development of how this regulation is changing around the payments aspect? How do you see that coming along here?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of conversation around that stuff now. I mean, every aspect of Bitcoin is getting heightened attention right now. The tax side of it, for sure. A favorable regulation, a favorable government means that a lot of the stuff that previously was unthinkable in the short term is now possibly on the table. And a lot of that, there's like various ranges on that, from de minimis spending exemptions to zero capital gains on anything that's spent in exchange for a good and service, rather than, say, sending to an exchange to convert for dollars. There's a whole range of different things that might be on the table and possible now. Who knows where it's going to go? When you have a presidency that starts off by creating a shitcoin and dumping on people, and it's really hard to know what's going to happen after that. But yeah, definitely a lot of questions, and as you said, like, we're focused on a lot of that stuff as it regards to payments, because payments always comes with the tax and accounting questions, and so anything that is favorable on that side, we're definitely all over that. Yeah.
So before we move on to kind of the exchange side of things, one question I have for you was the regulatory, I guess, issues prior to this presidency coming in. Were there any clear regulations around that before? Has it always been kind of perceived, I guess, as the Wild West?
It was, I mean, it's really weird because the regulations seemed to be, there was nothing concise and really clear. It was always just kind of, well, laws already exist, so don't break them. Like, particularly around securities and things like that. I know that mightn't touch like a lot with what we were doing with Zaprite, but there was always basic laws like capital gains things and different reporting laws and money transmission, things like that. The previous administration, they were going after developers a lot. They were trying to shut down, choke point 2.0, shutting down bank accounts, things like that. So everybody was kind of on tenterhooks, not really knowing what was true and what was not true, and there's always rumors and different things. It seems to be, while maybe not necessarily clearer now, at least more optimistic, in that there's not going to be as much pushback and as much heavy regulation. It's going to be more light touch. It's going to be more like innovation favorable. So that's really optimistic. And I think while we may not have any clearer indications or any new regulations and things like put in place just yet, it is very much an optimistic time where you know that things are going to kind of fall into place over time. So it just gives you more freedom to kind of continue and maybe accelerate things that you were doing, but now have that kind of more optimistic approach.
Okay, awesome. Well, now we've got Adam coming here, where obviously you opened up Bitcoin Well, first publicly traded company for a Bitcoin exchange, first non-custodial Bitcoin exchange that's publicly traded, but it's in the 51st state up there in Canada, right? So how have the regulations been in Canada? Because it's always been perceived, with the truckers convoy and everything else, that it's been worse. But I think we were talking a little bit before we came here. You had a harder time here in the US. So talk a little bit about the differences there and how it is being the 51st state.
Yeah, man, one can dream. I think that Canada has, I think, one of the highest per capita Bitcoiners on the planet. And it's because there's not a lot of individual choice in Canada. Canada loves its monopolies and its duopolies. There's actually only 6 banks in Canada. I think in the US, you guys have like 400 banks or something. We have 6 in Canada. I'm banned from all of them. And and what that means for individuals is that it forces you to look outside and find alternatives. And obviously, Bitcoin is the best and greatest alternative, and so the smartest people are usually the ones getting banned from these types of establishments, and they are the ones finding and then building on Bitcoin. what that high level of centralization does, though, is it creates a very streamlined regulatory approach. And so in Canada, we don't have this state-by-state kind of licensing like you do here in the States. We just have a federal, one kind of opt-in license. If you're doing anything money service related, then you need the money service business, not even really a license, registration, and you have to kind of follow and abide by that. And so we've been really lucky in Canada to be able to have great access through the regulatory stuff. Banking, on the other hand, has been like super difficult, part of the choke point stuff. But it was cheaper to start up in Canada because the regulatory certainty was there. Comparatively, like we launched in the US last year, and we kind of had one of two routes to go. With 0 customers, we could have shelled out about $500,000 to get licenses and all the regulatory compliance in each state, or we can partner with someone and kind of piggyback off of their like MSBs and other regulatory stuff. And we opted for that route because it was obviously much cheaper. But as a result, our product is worse than it could be, simply because we have to rely on the infrastructure from the partner. And so we do what we can to build an awesome product, and I think that our products are one of the best, especially being that, I think in the US anyways, we are the only non-custodial company. We're one of 2 in Canada. But I think that ultimately what this shows is that the Cobra effect of regulation really hurts us, hurts individuals, hurts consumers. We could have not expanded, which would have been less competition, and right now we do have less competition because it is so difficult to open up shop in America, or we have to all kind of centralize and segregate under single infrastructure. And so I think it just goes to show how short-sighted the regulatory environment is and how the free market is obviously an infinitely better system. And I think that it's important for Bitcoiners to keep drudging on. We are the first men through the wall. They often get the bloodiest, but really we pave the way for the next generation. And that's what I'm hoping that we can do is inspire a wave of non-custodial businesses to continue coming in and to provide what we know as Bitcoiners to be right. Bitcoin is 20% number go up and 80% freedom. And when we use custodial platforms, we just give away all the freedom. It's 80% of the value in Bitcoin is just freedom. And so I think we know that, and I think that we know better, and I'm hoping that we can build better platforms that way.
So what are some of the challenges that you face with building it non-custodial opposed to custodial, and some of the hurdles that you've had to jump through just simply from coming over here? Because you said you kind of piggybacked on one, but dive into a little bit deeper there, why it's more difficult to do that.
Yeah, so most Bitcoin platforms kind of have a barrier of educating people on Bitcoin to get new customers, and that's kind of hard enough as it is. We kind of unintentionally, but also very intentionally added a second barrier, which is you have to have your own wallet. And so you cannot buy Bitcoin at Bitcoin Well without a wallet that you own and control. There's no account balance at Bitcoin Well. You cannot hold coins there. We're not oh, we'll keep your coins and then educate you about self-custody. There's none of that. It is just straight up, you need to have a Bitcoin wallet. And for lots of people, they're used to the Coinbase experience or the legacy financial system experience where you just click a couple buttons and someone else holds the money, someone else has the responsibility. I believe that's bad. And so that second barrier kind of really, in a good way in the early days, showed us exactly who our customer was, which is existing Bitcoiners. We're not going to get someone who, or very few of our customers is it their first experience into Bitcoin. But at the same time, it allowed us to really focus in on what we are doing, which is building a Bitcoin product that makes it easy to buy and sell Bitcoin from self-custody, that self-custody piece being our single greatest differentiator. And I think that we were, over the long term, it gave us 2 great benefits. One, our workflow can be much simpler in the fact that, where before you have to deposit funds and then make a trade and then withdraw funds, we were able to mash all that into one single step, making the experience faster if you know what you're doing. But the second piece is from a regulatory environment in Canada, the regulatory people are hyper-focused on custody, which for us is very good because we don't have to waste a pile of money and time and lawyer problems with custodial regulatory problems. We just get to build great Bitcoin products, and all of our money can go into R&D and the promotion of those products. And so The low time preference pays off that way, and I think once again the Cobra effect plays out. And I think that doing the hard thing that you know to be right will pay off if you survive. And so making sure that if you're building, I like what we talked about earlier, what was said earlier with the group from Unchained, talking about like being mission focused and keeping those core values to yourself and or into the business. And I think that when you maintain, when you found a company and you're saying, hey, this is important enough that I'm going to pour my blood, sweat, and tears and sacrifice my family time and sacrifice my dollars and convince other people to sacrifice their money. This is that important. Don't stray from that. Be very, very diligent in maintaining those values. For us, it's self-custody and the freedom that Bitcoin gives you. Our mission is to enable independence. And maintaining that throughout your life cycle of your product. We've been doing this now since 2013, so it's been a long time, and there's been like ups and downs and, and crazy waves. And it's not always been the easiest way, but we believe it to be the right way. And so I would really encourage all the founders to like maintain strong with your mission and definitely continue on with what you know and believe to be right.
All right, awesome. Now we'll move on to Francisco, because you are in a unique scenario as well, where you're now building out, well, first of its kind in Mexico, kind of dealing with that regulatory issue. So talk about some of that, because I know you love the regulators here, right? You said you've had to embrace it, so to speak, right? So tell us a little bit about that journey and what it's like dealing with all those bureaucrats.
Yeah, and just to be super clear, we've used that word, embrace, as we're going to have to face it. It doesn't mean we like it. Unlike Adam, some of the things you mentioned that you've had to go through, we are on the completely opposite spectrum from the regulatory aspects. Mexico was actually one of the first countries in the world to implement what's called as a fintech law. And to obtain this, you're right, it does require time. Obviously, the documents, manuals, attorney fees, it's quite a nightmare. And the other thing you mentioned that caught my attention was giving access to the users. And we have had to make those choices too, removing the point of friction of access. We did have a really strict set of requirements for our users to even touch the Yopaki wallet. And we did notice that a lot of them were just not setting it up. Mm-hmm. I mean, we beat it almost to the point of annoyance of, let me tell you how important this is. You really can become a sovereign individual. And then, a good friend of mine here, Jim, mentioned, I mean, we know what this means, but do your users really care? Sadly, the answer is no. Mexico has some issues and practices in the finance industry that we don't really talk about much, I feel, in the space, which is the access to banking. And this is maybe a hot take, but the reality is that the whole story and the narrative of banking the unbanked in Mexico, it's not true. That's not really what's happening in Mexico. It's really easy for most users to walk into a 7-Eleven equivalent, which is called an OXXO. And there's thousands of them. There's about 20,000 of stores like this throughout Mexico. And within 20, 25 minutes, any user can walk out with a Visa card and an app and giving them access to some sort of financial rails. We don't like it, right? It doesn't mean that we think that's the best way, which is why we're trying to do something that is very challenging, dealing with the regulators. Obviously, we're masking it with the Bitcoin element of the gamification. And then as we go through that process, the education part becomes more and more important.
Okay, so now on that, you talked about kind of knowing your customer, which I think Joe really said very beautifully at the beginning. So why don't you talk about how you've kind of developed your framework, like what you guys are offering, and then I'll leave it for all of you guys. How have you developed everything as you're getting to know your customer and kind of developing your product through there? But we'll start with you, Francisco.
Yeah, through a lot of trial and error, because coming as a Bitcoiner, you think you know what's expected in terms of using the app, downloading it, getting exposure to let's say in this case, to a Lightning wallet, usability, where buttons go and whatnot. And having that whole journey of really becoming humble and finding out that most users still don't get it. Maybe there's a phase 2 where once they have that initial reaction of spend, and I've had this with family members, with my mother-in-law, the first time she made a Lightning transaction, she really did say, wow, this is amazing. Every American should be doing this. And I said, this is a moment of pride that you get it. But the time it took to get there it's quite painful, even today, right? Something I kind of alluded to earlier in the announcement we made was that even if you tell people, hey, there's going to be free Bitcoin by, in our case, playing our game, it's still, I mean, does it really mean much? And what do you mean by free Bitcoin? Well, a fraction of a Bitcoin, and it's called Satoshis. And what can I do with it, right? So I think it's very important to be on the ground and testing with actual users that we are trying to attract to see what their experience is. And hear it. Just be honest about would you use this? And if not, what would make you want to use it? I guess for us, for Yopaki, Carlos and I have talked about this. We're still really early, and we're still adjusting to some of that feedback we're getting from our users. We believe that we're finding the right path. That path for Mexico, not for Canada, because you're right. I think per capita, Canada is so far ahead in understanding finance. But for us, it's really offering them traditional financial services. So for example, right now, we have users, as I mentioned earlier too, basically sending money to their bank accounts. They don't need to know that there was a Bitcoin transaction on the other end. For example, for me, if I have a friend, or even if I were to send a remittance, I can do that from my wallet, and they just get it in pesos. All I would need is their bank account. So maybe the next step is, hey, by the way, I used a Bitcoin wallet to do that. Wow, how do you do that? Oh, let me show you. And then the whole onboarding begins. It is a lot of work. I think we've signed up for this, and we're not backing down. But it is part of that learning and proof of work we've had over the last year, 2 years now.
100%. Sure. Yeah. So for us, one thing as well, like what Adam mentioned before, is we're coming from that place as well, where is that slight bit of friction where the user requires a wallet. Because we're non-custodial, we don't provide a wallet, so they have to come to us. But that's kind of part of our model. Like, we want to meet like businesses and users where they are. We don't want to get them to have to sign up for something new. So we're kind of in that unique position in that, like, we're happy to just work with them where they are to make their life easier. So, and it kind of works for us because we're, like, our initial market is Bitcoiners. It's people who run businesses, who get Bitcoin, who understand Bitcoin, and who just want the best way possible to get that onto their balance sheet. So we're not trying to do as much of the education as much as it is just to provide the right tools. Now, having said that, we do focus quite a lot on the buyer side as well, the customer side, paying the invoice. So our checkouts, we focus a lot on the customer experience, the buyer experience, even though that's not our core customer. It's very much an integral part of the whole process that provides the full feature set to our merchants. But there is that side as well where, because we're onboarding existing Bitcoiners, the level of requests of features tend to be that bit more advanced. Now, we're happy to look at all of those because that's like what we do when we do, like, say, an Xpub integration where you just connect a general Xpub into Zaprite. We build a lot of advanced features on top of that. Like, we built our own gap limit customization to expand the amount of addresses available so checkouts don't ever get, like, stuck without an address. We built an address reservation system for increased security on generating addresses and pasting them on PDFs. We built lock address features where you can do consolidations and things like that. These are all advanced things that different non-Bitcoin companies wouldn't ever have to deal with. So it comes with its own set of trade-offs in that you're constantly trying to please a knowledgeable Bitcoin user base. But at the same time, we're trying to bring Bitcoin payments to the world. So we are trying to go after those other businesses that might not necessarily know really much about Bitcoin, but they're starting to hear about it, starting to learn about it. But yeah, it's a really, as Francisco said as well, like, we're signing up for this. This is what we want to do, and we love it. And I mean, I personally love it, and I know, you know, Parker and Will and Nate and the rest of the team is really passionate about this, and this is what we get up every morning to work on, is like, how can we just take those customer support tickets and just keep increasing our product like bit by bit, because it's what we're here for. Yeah.
For us and for me, I'm super lucky that I get to build the product that I need and that I use. Again, like thinking about Bitcoin and self-custody being for Freedom Maxis, as someone who has no access to the TradFi system, like I just need Bitcoin well to pay my bills, pay my power bill. My kids like to eat, and so we have to go to the grocery store and do all this stuff. And so what that gave me was a really clear filter to make decisions through. Can someone use this without someone else's permission? And when you do that, you get to also kind of design a persona and you know, kind of figure out who your customer is around that filter. And I think that using filters in the business have been one of the greatest advancements over the last couple of years that I've been able to really lean into, because then every decision just becomes binary. When you're working with a group of very competent and intelligent individuals, and you have kind of a 1 or 2 or 3 different filters to run your decisions through, it no longer becomes like, this is better or this is better. It's like, well, which one, like of the 2 decisions that we have in front of us, which one, you know, enables more independence? Which one helps people replace their bank with Bitcoin well? Which one, you know, is going to appease this type of group that we've kind of decided to constrain our product towards? And so giving yourself a filter to choose your customer, and then just dialing down that customer. And if that customer is not you, like again, I'm very lucky that like we get to build a product that I need to use and that I want my kids to be using. Like my kids will never, I've got 4 kids, 8 and younger. They don't really have the need for money at this point, although they are saving in Bitcoin, which is great. But like they'll never have a bank account, and they won't have a bank account because we will be successful in people being able to replace their bank with Bitcoin well. And I think that if that can't be you, if you're building a product that you don't get to be using every single day, as the founder or high-level team member that is, if you are not the number 1 user on your platform, then you need to find someone that is and be their best friend. You need to talk to them every single day, every hour of every day. Find 3 to 5 like really hardcore users that are going to be using your product, and then just like rip it with them, go for coffee with them, buy them lunch weekly. Being in touch with your customers, like you both have said, is the most important thing. I'm lucky that my customer is inside my head, and then I've got a core group of people that also do that. But if that can't be you, then really encourage you to like find them and be best friends with them at all costs.
All right, awesome stuff. Well, thank you guys all for coming up, and give these guys a round of applause.